Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from MaliciousCompliance. Story 1 was posted by Mem1911, but it was apparently posted by someone else named Dark Lord Arbiter. Some malicious forklift compliance requested post here by Dark Lord Arbiter. Years back in my early days of employment, early 2000, when I worked on the loading dock, we were expecting a big load of tech and products for the new office layout. Some fancy upgrades and big tech sending the latest computers and network equipment, plenty of expensive equipment, and my boss told me to keep the trucks coming and going as smooth as possible. So we had the team on with a few extras. My responsibility was to unload the pallets and stack them out of the way and ready for return to their owner. Company-owned pallets have to be returned. At 6 a.m., I recaffeinated and started the forklift and got to stacking the CHEP pallets ready for collection. At 8:30, one of the main representatives came in early and parked on the dock. This was a problem as the trucks were scheduled to roll in at 9 a.m. I asked him to use the main car park and he told me to F off and do my job. My job was to make sure the truckies had unobstructed access to the loading dock. I interpreted this as, I am too important. Put it somewhere for me. So to keep from damaging the car too much, I slid a CHEP pallet under it and got to lifting it. And I put the offending BMW up on a stack of pallets. The entire time singing, "Nothing lifts like a crown for picking it up and putting it down." We had a crown forklift. The rest of the crew were in stitches, laughing. Is that actually a jingle this company uses? I've never heard that song before, so I can't put tune to it. Many of the truckies rolled up and knew immediately I was on duty. Those guys always had the best stories to hear, and some of them had a good chuckle and made off with a fresh cup of coffee. The day was going smoothly, and we worked that forklift dry. As the last pallet came off, the tank on the forklift emptied. As I dropped off the last pallet, we all got that unpacked and used a tug, small electric cart puller to drag the forklift out of the way. So I contacted the boss and told him to get me a payment slip to get the tank filled at the fuel station. He came down with the form and the representative. He was all smiles and thanks for the purchase of the bulk computers and hardware, but that changed when he spotted his BMW, and he was pissed. He threatened my job, demanded to my boss that I get fired. I just looked at my boss and said, "We should look at the security cameras." When my boss reviewed the security footage, he pointed out that I did ask him to move and park elsewhere. He then looked at me and said, "Thanks for another day. See you tomorrow." The representative wanted the car down immediately. I said, "We can't. The propane tank for the forklift is empty and gas delivery is tomorrow at 6 a.m. My boss handed me the pay slip for refilling the forklift tank. He said to get the gas in the morning. Sorry to interject again, but I did not know that forklifts ran on propane. I thought they might use diesel, but propane? The representative spat some more obscenities and said this will all be tagged into the bill if his car was damaged. He said it won't take much more than a postage stamp to send his boss the footage of him obstructing their loading dock, and then my boss looked at him and tapped the sign that said, "This is a loading dock. Park at own risk. We are not liable for towing or moving your vehicle. Fines apply." The next day, after detaching the tank from the forklift, I lugged that bugger to my car and drove it off to get refilled. Upon returning with a changed tank of liquid juice for the forklift, I started that bugger and got into moving the BMW down from its perch and ready for the representative to collect. So it's 6:30 a.m. He has not arrived. So I decided to place this thing in the nearest accessible parking spot, on the street, ticketed spot, as our car park was not open yet. It was the only safe place available. I contacted my boss and said, "Call the rep, it's ready for collection. It's in spot XX on the parking metered line." He responded with an okay. Then I got to work sending off the pallets for the day. It was a half-shift day for me. Now, as for Mr. Representative, he did manage to collect his car before it was ticketed for not feeding the meter, and I heard through my boss. The rep got chewed out and screwed out of his sales bonus for acting like a jerk. I miss that boss. I love bosses that support their employees when somebody else is in the wrong. Moving this guy's car, you didn't damage it. He's parked there. You guys have work to do. You moved it out of the way. It's that simple. He's the jerk in this situation. Our next story today is by ENC SWDV Rush. If you don't like it, you can just leave. When I was in junior high many years ago, I was usually a quiet person. We had an older gentleman as our science teacher. About halfway through the year, he broke his leg. I think he had been doing some work on his house and fell off a ladder. We got a substitute teacher, a middle-aged woman, who told us initially she would only be subbing for about a week or two. The class was usually not too bad, but one day while she was trying to lecture, people weren't really listening and it was just getting a bit louder. She didn't really handle it well and started screaming at the whole class and ranting about our behavior and disrespect. She finally ended with, "And if you don't like it, you can just leave." Now, I had been sitting quietly the whole time, but her yelling was quite offsetting for me. I listened to her whole rant and kinda took it personally, although I know I shouldn't have. It just kinda set me off. So as soon as she shrieked out that last part of, "You can just leave," I stood up forcefully. It pushed my chair back about 4 feet. I was in the back of the room. My chair scraped loudly and made that metallic sound. When I stood up, the whole class turned and everyone just stared at me. The substitute and I stared at each other for a few seconds. Her mouth was open, and then I just walked out, slamming the door behind me. I called her bluff. I guess I have a bit of a rebellious streak in me that doesn't come out all the time, but something about her yelling and losing it in front of the class rubbed me the wrong way, and brought it out in me at that moment. I took a minute, walked over and got a drink of water at the fountain, and casually walked back in the classroom. She asked where I went, very quietly, and I told her I was thirsty and wanted a drink of water. The whole class was watching when I came back in, but after I returned, the rest of the class was fine. She didn't send me to the principal's office, which I fully expected. She kept teaching the rest of the semester because the injury to our teacher was worse than they thought. She never yelled at the class again or made any more ultimatums. She and I never brought it up again. Deserved? Sure. Malicious compliance? Sure. But I am one who's going to advocate for substitute teachers. They always get classes that just take advantage of them, especially if it's a short-term substitute, somebody that the students don't know at all. They, especially in certain areas of the world, love to take advantage of a substitute teacher. But again, a situation like this, you can have like half the class popping off and being super loud and being obnoxious and talking to each other when the substitute teacher's trying to teach. And then you can have these quiet kids that don't deserve to be yelled at too. So it's a tough situation for a sub to handle. I feel for her. This story was posted by Snab Dedrader Dave. And yes, this whole next statement is the title for this. When China decided to crack down on Hong Kong's civil liberties, as I, a citizen, still had to pay my taxes to its oppressive government, no problem. I did it so that I actually made them lose money legally. Disclaimer, I have long since moved out of Hong Kong, so I guess I'm more or less safe now to share this story from a few years ago. Anyway, much has been said about the Hong Kong protests of 2019 to 20, so I'll not elaborate further. In 2020, when the Chinese Communist Party, unable to control the public anger from the protests and increasing police brutality, decided to use their nuclear option of severely curtailing Hong Kong's autonomy and basic civil rights that was promised to its people when the city was handed over to China in 1997, that's when I decided it was time to leave. But in the meantime, a lot of preparation needed to be made for my exit strategy. I was still in a job and still had to pay my taxes, and there was COVID, which further delayed my departure by a few years. Before I finally emigrated, sometime last year, I needed to maintain as low a profile as possible so my family could escape from there safely. So tax evasion was a no-no, as much as I no longer wanted to pay my taxes to pay for the salaries of the intransigent officials that were upping the ante and oppressing my fellow citizens. Instead, I discovered that you could pay taxes electronically using an electronic payment service to pay for almost anything, including taxes. You could pay for stuff via mobile phone or on the internet. For every transaction made, the vendor will be charged 2 Hong Kong dollars by the service company. If you're paying taxes, the vendor would be the government. Now, notice here that they did not state a minimum amount for every transaction, meaning that if I pay 1 Hong Kong dollar and the payment service charges the government 2 Hong Kong dollars per transaction, the government ends up making a net loss of 1 Hong Kong dollar. If I do it multiple times, the CCP government will lose a lot of money. And the fun thing about that, at least when I did it, it was perfectly legal. Though the main catch was that the service only lets you do up to 50 transactions a day, amounting to 50 Hong Kong dollars. The CCP government will still lose 100 Hong Kong dollars. But that was not going to stop me from sticking the middle finger to the CCP. So I diligently paid my taxes dollar by dollar, day by day, using that electronic payment system. I made sure to set aside about half an hour every day after coming home from work so I could perform 50 transactions for that day. I lost count of how many months it took me to completely clear my taxes for that year using this passive-aggressive method, but I fully realized this small resistance would barely dent the CCP government's coffers. At least I sleep in the knowledge that the taxes they use to oppress my fellow Hong Kongers will not have come from me, as I refused to pay the CCP a single penny anymore. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a warm day.